Again, warm welcome from my side. I'm Simi. I'm the partnership and growth lead of Explore. And together with the amazing team of Explore, who are actually also here in the room, I want everybody of them to stand up, please. Stand up. Stand up. So we have Anastasia, we have Adrian, we have Claudia, we have Natasha, we have Paula, we have Gunda, Bianca. Startup Whisperers, we have also Florian in back, Startup Whisperers, Startup Therapist. We have actually, who else? Alexandra is also outside, yes, welcoming you. Different roles, and we have Engagement Alchemists, we have, like I said, Startup Whisperers, Startup Gurus, we have also Product Queen, and we have Click King. Talking about the Click, Adrian is our Click King, and if anyone does not want to be in the pictures, please tell him so he take care of that. Why are we doing this, and what is Explore? So Explore is the gateway of early stage startup into our ecosystem. And it is, I mean, we've been called Powerhouse. Why Powerhouse? Because it's a very critical phase that we cover. It is actually the phase that they start their ideas, their project, and they turn them to ventures. And this is where actually also the big leaps happening. And we're not doing this alone. So like actually the amazing team is behind it. We also get a support from amazing network. A network we build on two pillars. One is our amazing experts and mentor network. And some already are in the room. So they have also the color dark blue. They're there. They're supporting us. They are domain experts, and they know exactly what they're talking about. So they challenge the startup with smart questions, but then also guide them and open the doors with connection for them. The second pillar is actually our successful founders from our own ecosystem, where everything begins here, and now they build up international and national successful ventures. And they're not growing only their own business. They just come back and help us grow this ecosystem by giving back to the community. So I'm honored that I have not only one, but two today with me. First is Maximilian Schmidt, the co-founder and the managing director of Kinexon Sport and Media. Welcome. Once started as a Munich-based startup, they're now penetrating the world sport board game, not only soccer, adding up basketball and handball to it. And we have also a special guest of honor, the one and only connected ball from Kinexon, which you're going to show us later. Welcome, both of you. Cool. Next one is our own CEO, our guru, Helmut Schönenberger. From our own ecosystem, who paved the way actually for all the things that we do here and many great ventures that actually arise here at the ecosystem. So very well welcome, Helmut. Thank you very much for doing this. The star of the shows actually are startups. They're amazing startups. Like they're in the room, hands up, startups. Woo, come on, more energy. Exactly. So we have been doing this for you. So enjoy a little bit to the agenda. And now I'm going to pass the mic to Helmut. He's going to lead the questions to Maximilian. After that, like 30, 40 minutes, we're going to switch into your questions to both of them. And then after that, we have a networking part so you can network together. So have fun and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Simi. So great to have you here, and Maximilian, great to have you here. And maybe let's start with the technology. So what's so special about the ball?
First of all, thank you, Helmut, and thank you for the invitation. Coming back to, even though it's UnternehmerTUM, for me it's all together, UnternehmerTUM TU München, my alma mater. And great to see so many people being at that stage on the verge of founding a company. The connected ball it's so special because it's for the first time in the history of football that we could bring a sensor technology in the ball that was played on the biggest stage of football at the World Cup. And when we started the business over 10 years ago, we were not sure whether it's possible to build the ball so that nobody feels the difference to a ball without the technology. And building a technology that's so small and so embedded into the ball, nobody could get the difference. That was something that we weren't aware when we started. and also being robust enough to endure the forces when someone really hard kicks against the ball. That was not known when we started, and it took us 6 years of development after FIFA launched it together with our partners Adidas at the World Cup in Qatar. And that's an official ball for the Women's World Cup in New Zealand that was actually played in Sydney in one of the games. And yeah, it's one of the longest journeys we had through our innovation pipeline. So the special thing is definitely that we didn't know whether it will work out in the end.
Cool. Wow. And tell us a little bit more about the technology inside. So what's inside?
It's a very small sensor. It weighs about 8 grams. It has an ultra wideband chip on it, a silicium, to measure like the position, the 3-dimensional position of the ball on the pitch. It also has an inertial measurement unit, an IMU, with an accelerometer to detect every single touch on it. Also like having a gyroscope to measure the spin rate of the ball. So it's basically a sensor that wants to provide us the capability to build a digital twin of the ball on the pitch. And it's communicating with radio frequency receivers that are built around the pitch like local satellites. That's why we call it like a local positioning system, and then communicating the information either way to the referee or to the broadcasting or to the coaching.
Great. And now back to yourself. And so you are not an electrical engineer? You are not a software guy?
No.
You are?
We have a funny thing here that's called management and technology at the Tech University, which is a creative way of trying to make management people aware that there is some more complexity when it comes to science and engineering. So it's kind of, you have like a major in business administration and then a minor in one of the selected topics here. That could be, I had mechanical engineering myself, but others had chemicals or life science or informatics to choose from. So I have a technology management background here from the TUM.
Cool. And tell us the story. So how did you find out about this technology, about the market opportunity, and also about your co-founder?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was not my idea, to be honest. So Oliver and Alex, my two co-founders, they have been invited to Allianz Arena here in Munich. And there was like a behind the scene tour to see what kind of technology is built into this rather new arena back in 2011, I think. So it was like a 6-7-year-old arena, one of the most modern one in the world. And there was a lot of technology that was shown there. And also a server room with a lot of servers. And someone explained to them that there are about 20 cameras placed under the roof of this building to capture like all the movements of the players. And then there's an operator desk where like not only one desk, but actually 6 desks. People like trying to tell the cameras, so this is Bastian Schweinsteiger, this is Thomas Müller. And then everything goes into this huge server rack to compute data about the performance of the players. And Ollie and Alex, they basically said, this is great. However, this must cost an enormous amount of money. And we want to see this not only in Allianz Arena and Champions League, but it would be great to see it also for basketball, for handball, where budgets are smaller, or can we bring that to the practice pitch? So the idea was really like, how can we take a technology that's already out there, but make it more scalable so that we can bring it to a broader audience. So that was the original idea, I think, in 2011. And then when I finished my PhD, I joined them to build the company Kinexon Sports in 2014 to make out of this first technological idea a product.
And so what's the relationship between you and Ollie and Alex? So how did you meet actually?
We met at the Technical University of Munich during our PhD. So they did their PhD on the same floor where I was sitting, and we played football together every Friday. I organized a small football round, and they joined that round, and so that's how we knew each other. And I was the guy who was actually back then a youth coach in a local football team. And when Ollie kind of came up with the idea, and Alex was more like the techie who who had some more skills to actually build something like that. And he asked me about the feedback, what would be relevant for coaches, as I had a closer relationship to sports. And that's how we met. And when I finally handed in my thesis, I was free to join Kinexon Sports Journey.
And was it for you a hard decision then to join the company, or was it clear, or did you have like 10 options?
It was one of the easier decisions in my life. I did know that I wanted to do something around entrepreneurship. Finalizing my master's thesis, I did not have a great idea, so I decided to do a PhD to buy me a bit more time. And during the time of my PhD, I decided to do something around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial finance. So I had the great opportunity to meet many founders throughout the 3 years stint that I did that. And the desire grew in me that I said I wanted to join either way a startup or build something else myself. So I met with so many founders during that time, and I was fortunate that I met also Ollie and Alex. I had 5 more or less interesting ideas back then, but the combination of technology and sports and being part of the co-founding team and having like full responsibility for an organization was then intriguing enough to make an easy call. Yes, I want to do that.
Cool. And then you started, and so what's like the big 3 problems of a startup? It's the team, it's the market, and financing, and also the product. So how about these 3 or 4 problems? So the team you had, so it was 3 problems. So what was the next step?
Team, we had a founding team, and with Alex, we had a very strong CTO. And we solved the engineering challenge mainly by recruiting master students from the technical university. So we had a network here. Professor Diepold was very helpful in the early stages. So we had a lot of engineers coming out of university that we could get for us as a young startup for attractive salaries for us and back then there were not the big tech giants already in Munich. So the competition for talent was not as fierce as it's today. So from a team and talent perspective, we had, it was good. I think in the beginning, the one thing in the hindsight was maybe missing was experience, how to build it up. So we had 200% on the enthusiasm scale and the willingness to succeed, but not so much on the experience scale. Funding was, we really applied for a lot of grants, like for startup competitions. We had an European Space Agency fund to fund early prototypes. So we, for a very long time, did not apply for institutional capital. So we wanted to build it more like through getting early revenues from customers, and then we relied early on business angels, but it took us 4 to 5 years to invite institutional capital into the cap table. And then product-wise, that was probably the biggest challenge, because we were so love-struck with the technology that we had in hand, so that we mostly forgot about what's the difference between having a great technology and having a great product. So finding the product market fit was the biggest challenge, by just being not an expert in that industry. So I think it took us hundreds of interviews with our future customers to actually really learn the specifics, how we need to shape the product to make it really viable, and to understand what's a good price point, what is the biggest pain point, what are hurdles for them to fund it, and all of those aspects. That was, I think, the biggest hurdle that we had to overcome.
Can you be more specific about, so whom did you interview, and what were good insights and what were failures in these processes?
I think in the beginning, if you're not coming from an industry, so many founders also would start working 10 years for a club and then say, I see that problem at a football club. We need to have that kind of tracking technology. And then they would know exactly what they need. For us, it was more like we came out of university. We had an idea about what's the problem, and we were bold enough to believe that we should be the team that's building that product. So we needed to find first experts. So what we did is we asked in our network to get access to decision makers in clubs. So one of our first guys we talked to was Stefan Reuter. He was back then sporting director at FC Augsburg, and he was very intrigued. And he made an introduction to the head coach, which back then was Markus Weinziel. And so we had our first coaching staff that we could work with, and we had like an innovation project with FC Augsburg, and we learned a lot from them.
What were the conditions, or did they pay you for that? Or
they did not pay us for the first prototype. We had like a milestone to reach, that we built like a product which we would consider to be a beta product, where they could use it on a daily basis. And once they would have accepted it to have it on a daily basis, they would pay us a yearly license fee. So it was like proof of value that then led into like a paying customer.
And that was your first customer, basically?
That was our first customer, yes.
And like, how big was the revenue for the first year?
30,000. So our initial price point was about 30,000 per year for a club, for a standard system. That was how we imagined it should be. Today, the price point for our customers ranges from 8,000 to 200,000, depending really like on the scope of what they use. And we back then didn't know how budgets work at clubs, but that was our first one.
And how did you then went on this journey? So then first Augsburg, and who were the second and third and fourth and fifth customer?
The early market was in German Bundesliga, and what we tried to do was that we could use Augsburg as a testimonial, and now we would call it like ideally getting Markus Weinziel to be an ambassador for the technology. And we didn't call it like back then that. So we just asked him, does he have a friend that coaches somewhere else? So we tried to get referrals. And what we did is we went to community events, like coaches meet twice a year for like an education series. And we tried to get an invite to those events where we could get to the peer group of our first customer. So believing into those community events was essential for us. So the first case customers in Germany were then Stuttgart, Hoffenheim, Wolfsburg. So we grew within like a very similar customer base, but we also unfortunately went to like a ceiling, because what we underestimated was that the technological investment of the infrastructure of what we built, even though we believed it should be scalable, required like fiber at the practice facilities. And not every club owns all the pitches. Sometimes they're owned by the by the city. And the approval process to get fiber installed was a bit more complex. So we need to pivot our product to have a more mobile solution that didn't require fiber, which kind of caused that we had like a decline in our growth rate for football. And we then decided to go to the United States to try the same model in football to basketball, but because an indoor environment is easier to wire, because you don't need to do a lot of construction work, because they're already like the infrastructure is already ready for wiring. And then we went to the NBA as our second core market and tried to duplicate what we started in Germany with the football market.
Cool. But before we all travel to the US, let's talk about this maybe distraction you had with you told me before, with the ESA competition, and you had these experts telling you, hey, your application is good also for industry. So what happened there?
Yeah. I think when I started in 2014, I thought that we would be a pure play sports. And then early on, I think we had like it was a Bavarian Digital Award or something like that in 2014. And there was a jury. And in the jury members that we often had like experts, but they were no experts in sports. They were actually experts from BMW or from Siemens. And the comment that we got very often, and especially Ollie, who was our pitch master, so he mainly took the stage for pitching it. He always got the feedback, it's nice what you do in sports, but why don't you solve the big problems that we have here in Industry 4.0? And after the 7th or 8th of this startup competitions, where the jury came back with that feedback, somehow the idea grew in Ollie's mind to say, why not try also industrial and try to digitize the shop floors of German production companies? And not only that, I think back then we had also thoughts about going into healthcare and digitizing hospitals so that you know where every bed and every machinery is. We wanted to digitize also retail, like working with Aldi and Lidl, so that every basket has our technology. Luckily, we only did industrials and sports, not all of them, because that would be too overwhelming for our management capacity.
And today, you told us it's two like sister companies, and they're nearly the same size, or?
Yeah, we then build it like, because of building a second vertical, we build it like a holding structure. So we have like a Kinexon group, and there's Kinexon Industrial and Kinexon Sports. And the ratio probably is about 60-40 industrial sports from a size perspective.
Cool. So let's return back to the US. So that was like your internationalization plan. So how was it? Like, did you bought a ticket to wherever, Chicago, and then went there? Or how did you make it to the US?
We went. Our ticket was to Boston because MIT has a sports analytics conference, because one of their alumni is a GM from, or back then was GM from the Houston Rockets. Daryl Morey is also major in statistics. And we heard from that there is this conference, and we wanted to go there. And it's never like in hindsight, it always looks so rational, but back then it was not. So it was more like we in parallel identified this challenge in football, with the scalability challenge, that the decision-making took longer and longer for some of the clubs to get the approval, especially in Berlin. It was probably brought to the Senate that they want to wire the practice facility, and they didn't get the approval.
Did they get it right now after like 10 years?
They're now using our GPS solution, so they didn't have to wire. So that's another story. We had to expand our portfolio then to a mobile solution without all the wiring, which has not the same capabilities when it comes to the ball, but still provides you data for the athlete. And the majority of the teams that are not wiring their facility, they use the mobile one. So not all of them are wired right now. So during that time, we thought about what could be like a market that is more likely to scale for us. And we learned also throughout the first years that in outdoor environments, you can also rely on GPS. So there was a stronger competition, but what nobody solved was indoor. Indoor positioning and movement tracking was something that nobody really solved. And then we thought, what's the biggest sports beside football? Globally, that's basketball. And what's the biggest market for basketball? It's the United States. And then we combined that by buying a ticket to Boston to get to the, back then again, startup competition of the MIT. Plus, we applied for German Accelerator with Andy's program here. And we applied for that. And back in 2016 said then, okay, we want to try to move to the States and try our luck to conquer NBA and college basketball.
Cool. And did you move there, or was some team members there, or did you serve the US market out of Munich? So how did that work?
The recommendation from German Accelerator was that we permanently should move there, because you can only succeed if you do it 100%. Because we also built up the industrial part, our management capacity was already a bit split, so we kind of did not follow the recommendation entirely. So I lived in New York and in Munich at the same time. I had probably 180 travel days in the early years, and I had to make sure that I'm not too long in the US because then I had to double tax my income. But we hired an MD for the US business that stayed permanently there. So what we basically did is we hired one person to run the US business with me like a sparring partner as a co-founder, being like 50% of the time over there. I would have stayed there more, but we were not ready back there in Germany because all of our engineering and product development was in Germany, and we were not that mature that I could not come back. So it was really like a necessity to split up a bit. Ultimately, it was also okay, even though I think the recommendation wasn't that bad from German Accelerator to do it 100%.
And so, any advice to your fellow founders here? What would you do better next time?
If I ever will found a new startup.
Yeah, and like market entry, talking to customers, internationalization, any advice?
I probably would spend way more time in the market analysis, meaning truly understanding the ideal customer profile and understanding what's the workflow, how they think, what they're using, how is the budget process working. I think we were very naive in the first place, and we could have probably been faster in scaling if we have understood our ideal customer profile in a better way early on. So I would invest more of that. So even after 2 years in Germany and German football, we were still like very naive how US sports works. And it took us 120 or 130, I have to look it up in my Excel sheet, visits to different MBA teams and colleges to truly understand what's their seasonality, when do they buy, how much time do they spend on data, and all of that. That was really a learning process, and it took us also like 4 months to get to a proof of value and almost a year to get the first US customer. So I think the whole understanding of talk to the potential customers way earlier in a more semi-structured way to gain that intelligence is essential. If you are an outside founder, because I have not been an expert to the professional sports world before, then it's super important to spend the most time as a founder to learn that directly from the customer and not just do an online research. And yeah, that's definitely something that I would emphasize way more next time.
Understand your customer. And now you are on a super growth path, looking at other regions, looking at other sports segments. So what's next? So what markets do you like to conquer in the next 3 or 4 years?
We still believe that there's a lot of room in the existing market. So we're not working really globally. We're working Europe and North America. That's our core. We have an office. Here's our headquarters in Munich, and all the technology is here. The product management is mainly here. We have a product manager in the US to really address the need to have a dedicated market insight in that market, in an office in Chicago. We are very strong in basketball. And when it comes to the US, we want to grow more into American football and soccer, which is growing in the US, leading to the World Cup that they're going to have there next year. And in Europe, it's a lot about internationalization with the same markets. We don't want to do more sports, but rather address new markets. And here it's very important to have local partners because it's so fragmented. They speak different languages. English, I'm not a native speaker in English, but if you go then and sell, thank you for saying, I don't want to discriminate any country, but in every country that you go, you find, especially in sports, you find people that would love to speak in their native language. And then it's way easier if you have someone on the ground there. plus understanding also the specifics regulatory-wise is important. So we have a lot of regional sales partners to grow. And one animal that I haven't solved or tackled yet is China. We have 2 partners in China, and we have our first customers there. But that's again completely different to how Europe and the US works. So I guess that might be one of my key projects in the next 5 years. Is it how can you tackle a market like China?
And back to Europe, so your sales partner, so how does it work in practice? So what kind of companies are these sales partners, or are these individuals? So how do you do this? For example, like Spain, how do you get the market launched in Spain?
Yeah, I think therefore it's really important to understand the industry that we are in. Sports is a very niche industry. So very often sales agents have a portfolio of a couple of devices that they're selling. It could be like smart socks. It could be a heart rate belt. So it's not necessarily always so much technology that you have in, but they have a great network to all the teams. So most of the time, these are agents and that open doors. In some markets, we have more professional companies, which you have way more often in industrial setups. They're really like have a whole team that not only does door opening and selling, but they actually have then also like a first level support. And the latter is not relevant in markets that are very small. But if you have a large market like China, for example, here we have a partner that is a reseller that has really a broader area of our value chain. The same goes for, we have a similar setup in Southeast Europe with a couple of countries where we have a partner that is more like a reseller, not only like an agent. But we have these 2 types. Either way, they're just door openers in some markets, and we can then operate the support out of Europe. Because it's Europe, it's not so hard to do that. And in some other countries, we have more like a reseller structure because we need to have someone on site to do also like the first level support.
So last question from my side, and then it's up to you to ask Maximilian some questions. So when you then have these negotiations, how do you do this? So for example, now with such an agency somewhere in Spain, so any advice how to do these negotiations? How do you prepare for that? How do you do this?
The negotiation with our sales partners. We have now a reseller and sales agents program. We have like a model that we have defined different steps where they support, and depending on how many steps they do make, they get a bigger share of the cake. So it's really like we try to structure it to a certain extent, and we have also like a standardized reseller contract which clearly defines roles and responsibilities, but also like a service level agreement between us and them. Today we have that. The first ones we just made up more like 2 pages and handshake agreements, but that didn't work out in the long run. So now we have a very clear program with also a dedicated person that is responsible managing those sales partnerships and the network with all the different elements of what you need to make that a successful run.
So let's open it up. Or?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really amazing and eye-opening. I have the first question. And so tell us, when you, both of you actually, starting with Maximilian, when you started, what would you wish you had as a sport at the very beginning as a startup? Like when you're looking back, like look back and say, okay, I wish I had there more support. What was it? Can you remember that?
More skill?
I don't know. Let me surprise us. Was it more skill? What you want to have more support from the ecosystem? Back then it was, yes.
Thank you. Wow. I think the hardest for me was to get access to our customer. I think that was really the trickiest part. And it's super tough because it's super niche. To have like an expert network that knows exactly who to talk to in the professional sports industry. But having access to our first customers would have been definitely a boost and accelerator for us.
And who would have helped you, or how did you get into the first one? Like, did you know someone? I think you told the story, but what was that secret sauce there?
The secret sauce for us has been networking. So we tried to go to a lot of community events to grow our networking. Like we applied for weirdest programs. So I think one of the first things I did was I sneaked myself into a concept called Camp Beckenbauer back then in Kitzbühel, where there was no room for me, but somehow I knew someone at one of the sponsors to get a ticket, and I went out with 50 business cards. So I think it was a combination about networking and trying to identify where are those community events where I get these contacts.
Cool. Same question for you, Helmut.
So when I started 25 years ago, I think there was not so much trust into startups. And today I think it's the totally different culture here, that people are much more open. And so my chance or my luck was that Susanne Klatten supported us so much. So people took Susanne Klatten serious and said, okay, if she's the chairwoman, this is real. Okay, so that was my luck at this time, and now it's all great, and you have all the traction and the track record, and now everybody loves you. But 25 years ago was quite hard.
Tough nut, right? And how did you get to know Susanne Klatten?
Also pitching. So it was she was in the advisory board of the university, and so we had the chance then to pitch this idea, and it was really also, I was really nervous, and it was a very big thing, but it was like, winning my first investor. And now it's like every day we have great investors here. It's now like the day job, but at that time it was really a big thing. Yeah.
Cool. Now let's open it up, right? Okay.
So I would assume that if you build a product for pro sports, you would then build a product for non-professionals. Is this something you're doing or not at all?
At the moment, we don't work for amateurs and grassroots. It's one of the long-term avenues you could go. So either way, you find ways to monetize your existing customer base with new applications, or you're expanding your market, and it's a logical way to scale down to that level. What's the blocker for us at the moment is there's one level would be from pro sports teams to amateur sports teams, but the structure, how they are organized and how their decision making and the budgeting is so different. So it's basically building up a new company, because you will not have a lot of learnings from a go-to-market perspective, but it's definitely one route you could go, or then you could go to the individual customer and say, like, you go with the player, but then it's a B2C. That's also a different game. So for now, we've decided that we stick to what we have understood so far. So that's why we're sticking with pro sports. But amateur sports could be a way in, but then we need to redefine our go-to-market approach, because the customer acquisition costs in those smaller amateur clubs, where the price point would be a tenth of what we can earn from a pro sports, is so different that we need to have a completely different offering and different approach to make it profitable.
But you can go. But I mean, like in soccer, for example, I mean, of course, the scale goes down, but you have a first league, you have a second league, you have a third league, and so there are small steps in between, right? So it kind of makes sense to go from the top to the bottom, no?
Yeah, it's absolutely a logical way, but the step from once you're in the third league to the fourth league is huge, right? Wolfsburg, they have a purchasing department. If you go to Heidenheim, they're already still first league. They don't have a purchasing department. If you go to third league and you talk to Unterhaching, it's a small family business, basically, in Unterhaching. Then you go to Fürstenfeldbruck in the 5th or 6th league, and it's more or less volunteering. There is not even one person that actually has a salary. And that makes it, then fundraising for a technology becomes more like fundraising in schools. And so the whole allocation process to that is really, unfortunately, is very different. I would love to do that, but I guess that will be another new entity that we have to build then.
Hey, thank you very much. You said it took you several years to develop the technology and get the product market ready. How did you fund these early days, and what are your experiences and recommendations in terms of funding strategy?
So the key funding in the beginning was founder-based and also like government grants, prize money, and early customers. We didn't have a product ready to scale, but we had a technology that was working. So one of our very first customers was Red Bull Media House. They used the technology to get insights on the performance of their action sports. And then they did everything on the visualization on their own. We only provide the background. So we had a huge R&D project with them to fund partly our core R&D. So that was at the beginning.
And Maximilian, how big was that the project budget for that?
About 400,000. Yeah. So we realized after 2 years that it wasn't enough to bootstrap, and with especially this R&D project, which was very nice. And I'm really thankful to Red Bull. They also invested later, but it was also like very tricky because actually what we wanted to build was not what they wanted to build. And you always have then this problem that you get money from them, but you're also using the money to build your general IP, and you get into a really tricky position. So we realized then that we need more money. And then we went to business angels. And we had about 7 or 8 business angels before our first institutional round, and really high net worth.
Very good ones.
And very good ones, and luckily also very wealthy ones, so that they could sign off tickets that were a couple of 100,000 each, and not like, because today when I get asked maybe to support a startup, it's often that people chip in 5,000 or 10,000. We needed 2-3 million of investment in the first years, so you need a special business angel to have so much money to invest into a startup. But it's super hard for me to give you a recommendation if that's the right thing, because it really depends on the time to market you have. Like some startups can create money early on. If you have more deep tech or something very innovative where it takes 3 to 5 years to get market ready, you need such a huge amount of money. And depending on the capital need, there's a different investor type that's probably right for you. So depending on what you do, you might want and should go for institutional money early on. That's probably really defining what you do. It's an e-commerce startup doesn't need that, obviously, to the same extent.
Yeah, but in Kinexon's case, these are super angels, so they are like to give one name, like the Achleitner family, okay, and they are very, very knowledgeable, very strong. They operate like a VC, okay, and so it's the same level. And if you then have a follow-on round, it's one ecosystem, okay. It's not like, but if you have like these amateur business angels who chip in like 5,000 euros, it's a different game, okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Maximilian. Thank you, Helmut. My question is, in your experience, Maximilian, what signals show that our community is ready to adopt a new tech solution like Kinexon Sports?
I'm not 100% sure if I got the right question. Can you repeat it?
So you mentioned the importance of communities,
Yes.
right? And my question is related, how do you know that these communities are ready for your product?
Oh, okay. No. Brilliant question. So I can speak for Kinexon Sports that identifying the community is not so hard. I think to know who will be your buyer is not so hard to find out, to get to whether they're ready for that. You need to talk to them, right? I think you can only find out if you speak to them. And you need to speak to them in a, most likely even in a non-selling mode, right? So it's very important that you have conversations where the person that you want to sell to in the long run doesn't have the feeling that you sell to the person right now, because only then you will learn also the pecking order. In our case, for example, we learned, for example, that many teams, there's a level of technology you want to have as like a sporting club. You want to have like a gym for rehab. You want to have a video camera to analyze the game. And then you want to have a variable to track performance. And there's a pecking order in their mind what they need to have. And if they haven't gotten this already, you're too early for them, right? But you will only find out if you talk to them in a way where they are opening up. So I think there's no really way around that to learn your community, find out where they are, because there's no market report. There's no market report that you can ask. Maybe nowadays you can ask ChatGPT, but still then I don't believe that ChatGPT can give you the answer. Is that technology be adopted in 6 months, in 2 years, or in 5 years? There might be experts out there in that industry that can give you a good indication. But the best indication, I think, is if you get to know how your customer group thinks and how they work. There's no easy answer to that. Lots of communication, I guess.
Thank you so much. I'm Miguel. I have a startup. And I was wondering, because you produce hardware, that's basically the business that you have. But I don't understand if what you produce is kind of like a prototype every time because it's adapted to each club, or is a product that you offer that it's always the same, and then it's software what you adapt to the club. And if it's the second case, what was the biggest challenge, or what are the recommendations for the hardware companies to pass from a prototype to a mass-produced product? Or suppliers, you go to China, you produce in Europe, how does it work? That's the first one. The second one, I don't have a business background, but I'm taking care of the business side of my company. And right now I'm struggling a lot with bureaucracy. I'm not German, and Germany is a complicated country when it comes to these things. So what is the advice, especially when you came to the US and you experienced a different bureaucracy, a different system? Like, does it make sense making a company in Germany, in Europe? Like, is a better market to go to establish your company? It's not important because the company will work out these things somehow and it's okay. So yeah, many things. Thank you.
I hope you all brought time, because now we could talk, I guess, 3 hours on that. Very valid question. So we are a full stack company. We build the hardware, not the ball. Right? We never touch the manufacturing of the ball. We only build the devices that go in the ball. The manufacturing is done by Adidas or by Puma or by Derbystan. We built the hardware that is required to collect the data. We write the software that's embedded on the devices, so the firmware. We write software to analyze the data and transform the data into insights that are sport relevant. And then we also program the front end for the coaching. So we are a full stack company, and it's all standardized as a product. Yes, in the beginning, there's a lot of customization, but after a while, you define your product, and it's a standardized product that has options to customize, but only by the user. We don't do customization as a development effort. We have decided to develop here in Germany. Our developers are still here in Munich. And we also have a lab in our office where we can do prototyping. And then for the production, we outsource. So we don't do the production. We work with a partner here in Augsburg for most of the components that we produce. So our assembly is somewhere else, but it's in Germany. Why it's in Germany is because of the proximity for the quality assurance. We are an expensive product, right? We are a premium product, and we are not like a commodity for our customers. So the margins are still very high, and there's not like thousands of companies doing the same that we need to optimize every cost element of it. We're not producing millions of those, but rather thousands. And in that scale, producing local makes a ton of sense. I think the transaction cost to go to China at that stage probably doesn't make sense yet. It's maybe different if your product is textiles or is something that you need way more quantities. But in terms of majority and quality assurance, I think it was very important for us to establish it here. We've tried to do that in China for like our charging cradle. We went to go for China, and our supply chain manager, she almost quit her job because we forced her to do that. So as she says, she's never going to do that again. And it's possible, but if you're a small company and you have to do a lot of iterations, it's just a level of complexity you don't want to have as a young startup. I think that's different if you're larger. That was the first question, right?
Yeah, maybe, Miguel, can you be more specific? So what's the bureaucratic burden you have right now?
I mean, probably mostly that I don't speak German, but no, I see that there are better ways to establish a company in other countries. And then we are right now we're still not established. We're right now in the decision making on should we establish in the Netherlands? Should we establish in Estonia, in Ireland, or in France, and avoid all these like paperwork or all these very expensive procedures to establish a company, or it's not important, and at the end, like Germany is a great place to have a company. I don't know. So that's kind of the situation right now.
Yeah. So if, for example, if you want to establish a limited company, a GmbH, it costs you maybe like 2,000 or 3,000 euros here, more the whole process, and takes you 6 weeks. Okay, but for most of the companies, it's okay because this is a formal process. Okay, and if you have your people here, then it makes a lot of sense to have the GmbH here, not a foreign entity where you have employees in a different country. But I think also Gunda, your team maybe can also help out with our legal advisors. So talk to Gunda's team, please.
I will definitely.
Cool.
Hi, thanks to you both. Maximilian, you earlier mentioned the importance of speaking to your customers. You mentioned 120 to 130 visits to potential customers in the US before having your first customers there. And you also answered to a previous question how it's important to not be perceived as selling yet when you have these early conversations. So I would be curious, how did you get these future or potential customers to give you all this time for you to learn before you were then in a position to actually sell them a product?
There are two ways, I think. One is like the opportunity. I think there are opportunities where people are open to talk to you. If they go to conferences, they go to community events. So by them showing up to those events, it's already a signal that they are open to spend time and being willing to share. So go to those events. If you meet someone in their office and you don't have an appointment, it's very unlikely that someone has the time. So I think the first thing is like meet people then when they have the time. So community events help a lot, conferences, trade shows, because that's why they are there. They want to learn something. And the second aspect probably is, even though you're not selling it to them, make it attractive for them to talk to you. Like, even though you're not selling a product, you're probably addressing the pain point they already feel. Like you're telling him, I'm currently working on this problem and I want to make a solution. And if that's a problem for that person, he has an intrinsic motivation to speak to you, so that you need to have an angle somehow. But most likely you have one because you already started thinking about solving a problem for that kind of user group.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Timo. Thank you very much for the insights. So in the beginning, you've mentioned that when you started a company, you were not that experienced, you came from university. And my question would be, how do you handle that? So did you take a specific advisor, mentor, or your first hire with a lot of experience? So how did you handle that?
Good question. I think maybe also referring to the previous question, it's better to be an engineer and do the management stuff than the other way around. So, because everything you do as a management person, you can learn it on the job. I don't think you need to have a proper education to do that. It helps in the beginning. You're faster maybe, but it's definitely solvable. I had not a mentor on a daily basis like that. I did some coaching when we grew, because probably when we started, I had a naivety that I had a team, and I was not alone in this. So I had two other naive persons. They believe we can do that. So I never thought about that really. So that naivety helps. For me, it came later when we were in a scaling phase, when we brought in a private equity company. And I realized, okay, the next step is something I don't know why that step, but in that step, I was a bit more anxious about that step. And I kind of got myself a coach. And that coach was less for helping me out with a specific management task, but rather having someone where I could more or less just explain what's troubling me and structuring my thoughts. So for me, it was really like when I had more like a question that I couldn't solve for my daily business, it was more like a peer group approach that for example, we talked about Bastian from Celonis. We did our masters together. So sometimes if I said, hey, we're going to the United States, you also have done the same stuff, what's important? Through the German accelerator, they had like a mentoring program as part of it. So I didn't look for that, but it was there and I used it then. So there's a huge community out there that has probably faced the same problems, right? So many startups that are founded here all the time. So there's so many people who went through that already. You will always find someone who can help you there. I think the key will be find that community where you could approach them, and then just approach them, because most of them are willing to talk to you.
And I think that's it. So you use our ecosystem. So we found 140 companies per year here. Or you guys found 140 companies per year. Okay, and there's so much knowledge, because like Maximilian, he had to solve so many problems, and all the other guys had to do this. And so don't reinvent the wheel there, okay? So how do you set up a company, do legal stuff, what are good lawyers, all these questions. So if you need to draft a contract, as Maximilian said, okay, ask Maximilian, so who's your lawyer, who can do this? Do you have like examples for that? So don't reinvent the wheel and use this huge network here. This is one of the largest startup ecosystems in the world. And ask the guys, and also the Explore team has also official mentors and so on. So Gundar's team can help. Then if you go to Expreneurs, we have also mentor programs. So there's so much knowledge in the ecosystem. Use this knowledge.
Yes, thank you so much. And regarding this last question, I wanted to ask you specifically what type of coaching was actually really beneficial for you? Because I know there's so many options and maybe some of them might sound really helpful, but are not. So in hindsight, what would you recommend for young founders?
I've never looked at this, that there are so many opportunities for different coaching. So to me, when I took the coaching, it was more like, I feel too much pressure right now, and I don't want to, how do I solve that task? Because I thought it was like a surmountable task to reach that growth rate now with the new investors and the expectation around that. And I just didn't want to use my friends or my girlfriend to cover that in the evening to talk through that. So I really wanted to have someone who can help me structure a bit the challenges. So it was more like
therapy.
It's, if you want to say so, it's kind of a therapy, absolutely. So I think the person I did it with, he would consider himself a coach, but in a way, a coach is also a therapist, absolutely. And we did like a bi-weekly session for that. So it was very demand driven. I had a problem and I wanted to solve it. And I thought that this kind of coaching could help me. And I asked a friend of mine who had done coaching, and he said, try this guy. I could work with him because it's a very personal thing that needs to work out. Not every coach or mentor and mentee works out. In the early stages, I can really support what Helmut said. I think there is probably a lot of logical mentor capacity in that environment here. And if you feel that your problem is legal, then look for someone who's an expert there. We had a great angel investor in the beginning, Martin Giese, and he helped us, for example, a lot in structuring negotiations, because that's something that he's good at, right? I think he taught that at university, so he's done that a lot. He worked in the purchasing department. So he wrote a book. Absolutely. So I don't think you need to have mentoring. I think you identify yourself where you think, I don't feel good at that point, and then there is definitely an option out there. Because some things make more fun to you. Maybe you don't like accounting, and then you ask for someone who's an expert in accounting. And if you need to have more on go-to-market, then find an expert for go-to-market. I would not generalize my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Maximilian, I was wondering, what did you do specifically also in the early stages to try to protect your technology?
We filed in for a couple of patents. We found out that it costs a lot of money. So we decided to get like a couple of them in the books. But other than that, we are protecting probably our IP best through some kind of discipline in the way how we share it and how we store it. A lot of what we do is coding. So it really depends, again, probably on what your technology is about. We early on said, okay, we need to make sure that we are not infringing any kind of patent. So we have expertise in our CTO department about making checks on that. We are kind of filing info patents very rarely, because we think that the effort to do that is sometimes not worth it, how much we can truly protect ourselves. But this is a very personal opinion, because I think we've done a very solid job together with our partners in Adidas. And even though you get sued and then it costs enormously amount of money to get out of that, even though you believe you're right. So the whole patent system is something that I am not the biggest fan of, but that's a different story. So I'm probably not the best expert on how you protect your IP, but I make sure that you don't share it. And in terms of opening up your code, if it's software, right? It's not so easy to copy if you do it right, because you reinvent it all the time, right? It's like your product is continuously evolving, and if you, we had like a big competitor who opened up their product board, and they had it like public, so our team could see what they're working on. So that was like an easy mistake you shouldn't do. But in terms of patent filing, I guess maybe Helmut, you have a experience what a good advice is for startups. How much relatively should you spend in protecting your IP by patents or other copyright instruments?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're doing. Yeah? And so we have like deep tech companies who have huge patent portfolios. And then we have also very strong companies who don't have patents. So, but I would say don't be naive. And so especially in the deep tech area, we have a lot of attacks, okay, especially cyber attacks, but also if you are then going into the defense part, so we have also like heavy attacks of infrastructure, and so don't be naive. So there are a lot of people out there who want to get your IP. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Özge. My question is to Maximilian. You pointed out the talent acquisition is became harder in compared to back then. How are your strategies about this? And you're just pointing out the importance of communities and ecosystem. What if I said there is a community actually out of this ecosystem, just being there, but no one notices? Would that be interesting for startup community or like companies like yours?
Originally, when we hired our talent, we had a very strong proximity focus on Munich because we believed in the power of working closely together, and that truly changed. Now we have employees all over Europe. And we found ways of collaborating even in the development teams if they're not in the same city or the same office. That helps a lot hereby. We cannot always match salaries with all the large tech companies. So we try to obviously pay attractive salaries to our employees. What is important is that we provide people a clear path for development, right? Most of the people who start at Kinexon in our development departments is because we give them room to grow. And from a cultural perspective, really attract them by showing them the paths, how they can take over responsibility very early in their career. That helps a lot hereby. Your culture can help you a lot, but also obviously identifying the people that see a purpose in what you're doing, and that you can find out in the recruitment process very early on if someone really comes because he or she loves what you're doing, and that is then a higher stickiness. Also, they are not so easy to go away. So that's how we try to tackle it. I wouldn't say that we solved the puzzle because we see it's become harder and harder.
So if I understand right, in order to compete with the salaries what the tech giants pay in Munich, you prefer to have someone else out of Germany, out of Munich, right?
We not prefer, but we are open for that. I think we love people that come here from Munich because it helps if people can go to the office, right? but we opened up the opportunity that people can also work for our company if they're based in Ljubljana, or if they're based in Cadiz, or if they're based in Palermo. It really helps because you're broadening just like the pool of talent that you can work with, and you're not so limited only to the people that actually live within 1 hour reach of your headquarter. It helps. It just opens up more opportunity. I wouldn't say prefer, but yeah.
Do you have also an employee stock option program at Kinexon?
Yes, we do have an employee stock option program at Kinexon, and we see more and more people expect that.
And can you elaborate it a little bit? Because are you familiar with that your employees are also owners of your company? So that's what an employee stock option program is. So maybe Maximilian.
Of course. The key concept is that we try to provide employees the opportunity to participate in the value generation of this and the value creation of the company by providing them with stock options. So they become, technically speaking, they become virtual shareholders of the organization. That means whenever this company has like the possibility to distribute money out of the company by becoming a public company, or if we sell partly our shares, they have also the right to gain part of the proceeds based on their stock option program that they have. And how do we operationalize that? That means next to your fixed salary that you get, or a variable bonus component that you have, you also get for the work that you're doing, stock options, and that normally they vest over 4 years. That means like for every year that you are with the company, you get a certain portion of that stock option program, so that in the end you are a 1%, or that's an arbitrary number, owner of the company. And obviously it's not only the monetary aspect, but it's also like the people believe that they are owners, or they are part of it, and it helps for the identification. It helped especially like in the early days a lot when we were younger as a company. Now it's not that important anymore to everyone that's joining, but especially in the early days, it was enormously important to get great people.
And how big is the pool? So what's the percentage on the cap table for so only roughly, is it like 1% or like 50%? And
about 15%.
15. So 15% of the company is owned by the employees. And so how many right now are in the program? So of your employees?
Approximately 90 employees.
So then you can calculate about the shareholding. And it's a huge driver. And it's if a company becomes a unicorn, this is a big part of the compensation package.
Yeah, absolutely. And it became way more attractive throughout the years. I think when we started, it was not very common. And I think there are blueprints nowadays how to do it. And also the way, also from a taxation perspective, you have way better options nowadays, so that in the end, you don't have to tax it with your income tax. But it helps a lot if it's more like a part of the capital gain tax.
Firstly, thank you for this chat. So I have a question about, I think there are also some competitions in this market. That what strategy did you plan to implement or differentiate this company, and how did you achieve a competitive advantage?
There's almost no market without competition. It's a genius move or a very foolish move if you find that market. We have approximately 5 very serious competitors in our market. What we try to establish is a very unique positioning in the market. So there are things that we stand for and our solutions stand for that you get best if you go with Kinexon Sports. So for us, we are like an open, connected solution. So you can embed our solutions into other software that you have in a sports organization. So we have more like the Google approach compared to the Apple approach, if you want to compare it. So we don't offer like a complete portfolio that's more closed in. We really have a very open API logic. So whatever you do, and if you're a club that values that, they go for us. We are the ones that process data in real time. So everything that we do, we want to bring it into the cloud in real time and not store it on premise something. That's also a clear differentiator for our side. And then ultimately, we have also a key element of customer success. We believe that we need to empower and enable our customers and not let them just learn on themselves, because most of our users are coaches and their most valuable resource is time. So we need to ensure that our technology and solutions provide them with something that is not stealing a lot of time from them, but empower them to get insights really fast or educate them how to get it fast. And you build pillars of your positioning strategy around those differentiators that are, and that's the goal, unique compared to the competition that you're facing. And it's an ever ongoing process, because competitors are copying that. They are adapting to your strategy. So that's why you ideally have a product marketing team, and that is continuously working on how you position yourself as a unique offering in the market.
Max, thank you so much. 2 questions. How did you balance the need to iterate on your product while also having the pressure to meet and or exceed the expectations of your customers? And then secondly, what steps did you and your founding team take to avoid founder fallout, especially in the early days during these high pressure situations? And does the ball charge? How does that work?
The ball charges, yes, we have a charging coil. It's not plugged in here, so you don't see it, but it's a rechargeable ball. And it's also a recyclable ball, so you can reuse the electronics that's inside of the ball to build into a new ball. How often do we iterate it? For our hardware components, it's more like a 2-year iteration, so not like a car. I don't know if a new BMW series every 5 to 7 years. So we need to iterate the hardware component almost every 2 years to really make sure that we have the latest developments integrated for our customers. And then we are defining for every new iteration clear step of adoptions in terms of what features, what kind of improvements we want to do. What we prioritize and qualify through our product management team, getting all the customer feedback, trying to bring it together and then define what's the scope of the new product iteration we want to bring in. It's from a hardware perspective every 2 years. Software, it's more like every 2 months approximately. So we have a lot of iterations and software releases very frequent for us. And the third question was on the founder fallout.
How did you avoid, what steps you and your team took to avoid founder fallout? It's very common in early stage startups, especially during these high pressure situations.
That someone would drop out of the team. What we established early on, we had like a monthly dinner together where we would have like a circle of trust where we gave ourselves very open feedback, how we feel, but also how we feel about the collaboration. So we try to find room for us as a team to reflect. That was something that we established for probably 2.5 years. We stopped doing that after a while. Don't know really why, but maybe because we went into a different stage. But I think that was helping in the beginning, because when you are starting, you are just in a tunnel and just executing and going through, and there's not a lot of time for reflection. And so we just said we want to have like a joint dinner once a month where everyone is kind of handing over the voice to the next one and saying like, that was my biggest problem this month, and this is what I didn't like about how you reacted to that one, and that strengthen the level of trust. And if you have a strong level of trust, you also have like a bonding that you don't want to let the other one down. So I think that helped us, but I have never really thought that through. If there's a general rule for that, what really prevents you.
So you've been lucky. So let us get the last question, and I have an idea to bring a little bit of energy in the room.
Okay, we talked about energy and recharging the ball already. This is a question, Helmut and Max, to both of you. How do you actually recharge yourselves? So resilience in when you found startups is key. Many founders say. What is your superpowers?
For me, it's sports. I do sports myself. That helps me a lot to free my mind, but also comparably stay in shape, even though I'm not as in shape as I want to be. It really helps because I also sleep better if I do sports because the body's just exhausted, and it helps me having a good sleep. I love meeting friends, even though time is scarce. I think my best friends, they give me energy. And they bring me also into a different mindset because they don't really care about what I'm doing. That helps, really, absolutely. I think sports and having good sleep, and then having like people that you can break out of this daily routine, right? Because it just refreshes every time I have like a Sunday with my father, and we just go to the lake and I go back. I have always a fresh mind to go back to the desk. I think the trap is probably for me if I would never leave my office. So I need to have like those moments where I break out.
And I think we believe in what we are doing, and so it has a mission, and this is good time, value time to run the business and make sense, and this gives us energy, and then it's successful. But still, it's a lot of work. So how long do you work? Like, what's a normal day for you?
Probably about 12 hours on a weekday, not on a weekend. So I guess depending on what part of the year it is, it's probably about 65 to 70 hours a week. And I can only reassure what Helmut said. I think if you see purpose in what you're doing, it doesn't take so much energy from you, right? I think it's never for me, I never get out of the day and say like, oh, that was a long working day. The work is not the problem. I think the problem is something doesn't go forward. So what costs my energy is if I want to solve a problem, I cannot solve it, and it's or bureaucracy or something like that. So that's more energy taken from me than just working another hour. It can even energize me. I can have a customer meeting and I get out of the meeting and have more energy than before. So yeah, but yeah, about that.
Cool, thank you very much. Oh. I'm back again. Show us the ball. Tell us about the ball and what does it do and what is it for? Yeah, tell us about it.
That's the official World Cup ball for the Women's World Cup 23 in Australia and New Zealand, and I can even hand it around if you want to see it. It's the official match ball. I didn't have the time to pump it up, so it's a bit softer than it would be in a regular game. And inside the ball, as I explained in the beginning, there is like a small sensor, and Adidas, they have a patent. They protected their IP, how the sensor is attached to the ball. And they have like little wires that go from the bladder to the inside, and they hold like a little pit. And inside the pit is then our little sensor. And there are press articles that show like this spider web, how it is like really inside. Other ball manufacturers attach different because of the IP situation. They have then a different way how to do it. And how does it work and the FIFA had this very cool idea that was not our idea. They use it for officiating. So basically one of the biggest challenges in global football is that nowadays with so many cameras, we see every mistake that a referee can make. And it's really like it's a bad situation if you go out of the game, is that your team could have won, but the referee made the wrong call because he didn't see it right. And that's a big problem for modern sports. And so they want to use it to detect the exact touch of the ball so that they can match the perfect frame when a player touched the ball to precisely measure offside and onside, fully automated. So it's not really to the eyesight of the referee, because we are humans. We fail more often than any machines. And we can automate a bit that process and make the game a bit more fairer and not so prone to human error. That's one application that we never thought about when we started in 2012. It was more like a customer, in that case FIFA, who came up with that idea. And other than that, we are measuring the speed of the ball, how many touches a player have, so you can get like a sense of the performance. Like how often does Messi touch the ball when he's dribbling? What does he do different than compared to someone else would dribble with the ball? Or how hard someone can shoot the ball. I don't know who watched Arsenal London beating Real Madrid 2 days ago. Declan Rice scored twice a direct free kick. I think the first time ever in the history of UEFA Champions League that someone scored twice a direct free kick in one game. If you look at the shot, you see like a very specific flight curve as a combination of force and spin of the ball. And the technology inside of that can help us visualize that for the fans to better understand what was so great about that shot and the performance. So that's the basic idea why we're doing it.
Which game do you think? Is it like actual ball for a game, or is it just not?
That was an actually game ball that my team brought back from Australia. I think it was one of the preliminary rounds in Sydney, because our head of project management was based in Sydney, and he was allowed to bring home one of the balls. They have not a label on it. Only in the semi-finals of every tournament they even print it on. So if Germany is facing France or Spain is facing Portugal, they would print the date plus who's playing on the ball, so you have a unique experience. And in Qatar, it was also that Qatar played for the first time in the World Cup, and they went out of the group stage very early, but they had one game where they scored a goal. And at every arena, there are about 20 balls around the pitch. And then very often, a sponsor like Adidas, they hand it out to their partners and make it as a present. And you can say, I have an official match ball. Here it was a bit the other way around, because the Emir of Qatar said, I want that ball. I want that ball that someone scored for my team in that tournament. And we could identify, because we know exactly which ball was in the net for that ball. So Adidas and FIFA could give the Emir exactly the ball that was the one goal that Qatar scored in their tournament. And you can replicate that obviously for the player of the match, that they actually get not any ball of the match, but they get the ball that they actually scored the goal with.
Do you have any other cool stories? Because the ball come back. Tell us more. The ball is back.
I think one of the key elements we had in the beginning, that's what not really like a cool story, but maybe like a typical war story that's part of it. That for when Adidas is not producing the ball with the sensor 10 million times, they only produces for those tournaments, and there are actually 1,280 balls produced for the World Cup in Qatar. So it's not like a mass product yet. It's really like there is someone in China, and they have to train people who are doing the ball specifically to build the connected ball. So it's still like a kind of pricey ball, right? And they found out, and they have a very rigid testing protocol. They found out that the flight curve of the production that they had for the World Cup was slightly altering from what they had and what was outside of the marginal error that they wanted to go with. And they were super afraid. They were super afraid that a Ronaldo, who's not an Adidas player, might complain about the ball, and then it will be big in the news that Adidas is producing shitty balls and Ronaldo only didn't win the Champions League or the cup because of the ball. So they were very precise that they didn't want to have any negative press about it. So what they did is we invented a testing protocol, because even though there's a lot of standardization, not all balls were the same precise. So we decided to have a testing protocol. They produced another 1,000 balls. They doubled it. They sent them all to Qatar. We had an engineer from Adidas and from Kinexon and some from FIFA. And we had this testing protocol. Every ball went for this new testing cycle, and we labeled them in the green and the red bucket and produced the most expensive balls ever because it doesn't make any sense to scale like that. But because it was the first time, because there was this level of risk involved, Adidas wanted to be safe but sorry, and they decided to make that investment, which cost us a lot of nerves because we thought they might, if we don't have enough in the green box, they might kill it all. And eventually it all went good, but I had bad sleep during that time. Yeah.
Helmut, will you say, should we keep it as UnternehmerTUM? Thank you very much for this insightful talk. Let us have a group chat and then we'll start networking, right? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.